Okay, guys, I did a lot of work on the EQ Vortex, but I got nothing to show you. So I dug this piece of garbage out of my Charlie's garbage pile. A set of Fireball 292 angle plugs. Now, you can actually see, I'm gonna say this is probably mid 90's porting you got here. Okay? You can see though parts of the chamber that I didn't touch that were fireball chamber, right? I told you a while ago I've been doing this cut for decades. This is what they did. They did this. They actually overall it was nice, but it wasn't a huge amount of porting. I mean, they were kind of gasket matched, and they had round exhaust ports. Not a huge fan of round, but they were already there and they were huge, so not much I can do with it. The boss on the inside, I remember, was barely touched, and the intake boss didn't have much done to it at all. Okay, you can see my radius exhaust from ages ago. You can see cut where I took my Sioux set and plunge cut the chamber. Let's see, plunge cut there. The valve job is not great. It looks like I probably have to do the guides over. These were cut for 2055s. I used to cut these all the time for 2055 16s. Okay, you can see. Look at the bulge from the bolt boss. I was always afraid of breaking through them, years ago. So I stayed far away from them. Look at that. That's pretty terrible. I do remember these had a pretty good gasket match. So these openings were done really quite well, and I did not touch them. I must have opened the pinch, because the pinch is quite big. See if we can see inside a little bit. Alright, I had my rough surface on the roof and the walls, but the back of the bowl was cartridge rolled. Really doesn't look bad for older work. So, for the heck of it, I threw it on the bench. I had to find an old 2055. Probably the 2055 came out of my swirl ports out of my truck. But there's when I wire brushed them at some point in the past, I think I took the ceramic coating off of them. I don't see ceramic coating on there anymore. Well, can't win them all. But like I said in one of my first videos, you can do porting work without a flow bench, but you kind of don't know. You have nothing to measure your work. You have nothing to go against. Matter of fact, I have to show you the short side radius on the intake and the exhaust. Oh, I have to do that right this second. It may not be easy for you guys to see, but that short side radius is basically practically straight up. I realize it's hard to see, but it is not laid back at all. And I remember, look, notice it wasn't widened at all either. I didn't widen it. This was way before I had a Sonic, so I kind of rounded out the existing shape, and that was it. Let's see if we can see short side radius for the exhaust. Let me change that. Okay, I did a better job on the short side radius on the exhaust. And they work pretty darn well. So back to the flow sheet. It really isn't as terrible as I thought it would have been. I mean, you know what? We'll take the EQ Vortec. I'll take the EQ Vortec and put it next to it. Lower lifts are at absolute 0.0005. The 492s actually win, right? I would think the mid-range here is going to be dominated by the Vortex. Okay. Line these up so easy to do. We got 139, 160. They get murdered, right? 166, 191, 188, 212. I actually got the 300 even better than it was. Okay, 210, 229, 227, 241, 250, 273. The bigger valve and the bigger bowl start to pay off at this point. And then we go over the short side radius and start to lose it. 245, 241, 246, 243. Now, chances are this started out as a 166cc port. It's probably a 175, something like that. I have to CC that. This is probably 100 and started out 156. I bet it's a 180. I bet that port's a 180 now. But the exhaust works pretty darn well. Compare the exhaust. Now, the exhaust on the Vortex is tiny. All right, they're only, 59.5 cc's. And I added a few cc's to them. All right, 38, 30, 66, 55, 90, 76, 117, 95, 135, 114, 151, 132, 167, 146, 181, 156, 200, 175, 209.9, 188, 214 with a P. P means it's pulsing the manometer, so it's losing control of the flow at that point. That's not good. Okay, but up to 600, it was sweet. That port actually worked really well. And if you really take a look at it, you can see the texture I was using back then. Let's see if that's the focus. It was the burr, and then I went over it with the cartridge roll, but I didn't. Most of it is not mirror image. The back of the bowl is pretty shiny. But I didn't go crazy on that. The exhaust actually worked pretty darn well. Well, like I was said in one of my earlier videos, the fuelies that I cut for 205-516s ran really well. I mean, you take that 250 and you put it on a Victor Jr. that's ported out well. I bet you're only down to 240, 235 CFM. That makes for a pretty darn hot street ride. Another thing I noticed about these angle plug heads, very heavy casting. I mean, the EQ Vortex are 51 pounds. I bet these are right there with it. And that's about as heavy as a bow tie. So I'm wondering if these 492s, I bet they have a lot in common with the 292s. I never did a set of 292s. But this is a nice casting. I really want to go through this. And I probably have to check every inch of it to make sure it's even usable, because 2055 bowl and a fuelie gets kind of thin. And like I said, this was done before I had a Sonic. Pretty cool, right? Once in a while I'm going to dig something out of my junk pile and show you guys. But it'll be interesting to see what I can squeeze out of this with a little more modern flow bench technology. You know, if you take a look, move the EQ out of the way. Take a look at the short side radius. 388, 413, 398. It doesn't look as bad as you would think considering it's a cliff. Back of the bowl was really good. Look at that. Almost dead even. And the pinch was actually fairly good. The exhaust port, because it's round, I'm not really thrilled with. It's a little bit low. I mean, look at how low it is here. Right, this corner is a little high. It could use some work, but it still pulls some decent numbers. So I would have to see how much metal is in there before I start really changing the curves and do things with it. All right, guys. Thanks.